LWC came in with the modern website and frameworks. Okay, it actually introduced you HTML5, ECMA, JavaScript, and with that, you started working on it. Okay, and that is where what LWC did was there will be no interference in the Google Chrome browser. Okay, for doing that conversion of the readable tags. So these are actually HTML frameworks only built on top of it. So automatically when you are rendering or when you are typing in a lightning tag, it will automatically take it in the HTML readable tag format itself. So you don't need that rendering issue, and that also improves the performance. Okay, so that is the basic difference why we shifted our gears from one section to another. Okay, so now talking about this, when you are talking about LWC. Okay, now LWC has how would I actually start with it? LWC has a lot of things to understand, but it has a data model, a basic structure which is defined. Okay, if we actually know the basic structure, it will always have an HTML file followed by a JS file followed by an XML file, and after that, if you want, you can actually extend it as per your own requirements. You can have multiple files into it, but basically these are the three main structured files which are within it, which comes within it. So there are several tools which you might use for this. I think you all are already aware that you cannot work on LWC in your developer console. It will be working via either you use VS Code or you use the Lightning Studio, or right now we are also having the code builder, okay, which has been introduced by Salesforce, that is also going to support you. Okay, so now talking about the base structure. Now any kind of data which is resided, okay, in LWC depends upon these three decorators. There are three decorators defined within Lightning, and anybody who would like to just tell me what are those three decorators? Open to hear to anybody who wants to go ahead. Okay, everybody is typing in the
Oh,
values.
yeah. It's
uh,
wire, a wire decorator,
mhm.
and the track decorator and the API decorator.
Okay, when
Mhm.
to use what?
Yes, we use API to like fetch records ID from the URL or sometimes from the parent to child communication while we want to transfer some kind of data from the parent to the child.
Okay.
And we use wire is actually basically used to load the data from the Apex when we want to render that data at the time of the website load. I mean, like that page is loading at very time that time when we want to load the data from the Apex. So that time we use wire, and track is used to like when we want to earlier track was mostly used. I guess track is now deprecating. So track is was mostly used to like make the what I would say, like when we have some kind of arrays and other things, when we change its data, so we want to keep a track of it and make it lively updated. In that time, in that kind of scenario, we use the track. I'm not getting the words how to explain it. Like
Okay, understood. Anybody else who would like to try? I am keeping this as an open platform so that everybody can talk comfortably. Yeah, Maharaj, you can go ahead.
Yeah, yes, Nikhil. We have track API, decorators, and wire. So basically, track is used for the to track the changes in the properties. So track has been deprecated. As said, it is just used for the array, and API is just open the component or variable to the public.
Okay.
The and wire service is basically used to fetch the data from the server side by using its wire method or wire function. We have both kind of things in wire. So in order to fetch the data from server side, we can do by the imperative call, or we can use by the wire service.
Awesome, awesome. Puneet, you would like to also explain something?
Maharaj already covered most of the point, but yes,
Yes.
API, if I go with the API, it's a public for the public property. Let's say if I want to transfer my value from Lightning page to my LWC component, or you can say from Flow or some different component I want to, then we have to use public or API. We can say wire method we use basically for read data in cacheable mode, not for the DML, any DML operation. This is just for the reading data. And track, as Mara said, it's we don't need to use this. But yes, for the collection variable, and if you want to check this data with the HTML page, at that time we can use track variable.
Yes, so almost everybody is correct. Okay, so nobody is actually wrong here. So yes, we have got the three decorators which have been actually defined upon. Okay, so we have got the track decorator, which is a reactive property change. That is like whenever you are trying to change any value in the component, you will be reactively seek the output. Okay, so very useful to use it. Then you have also got the second one, that is actually called as the API decorator. Yes, whenever you want to make your field publicly available, you want to do your parent to child communications, very useful. You can go with the API decorators. And then you have also got the wire decorator. Wire decorator has been actually prepared so that you are able to perform server side calls. Okay, so when I talk about server side calls, what it means is I can actually get the data from the server, and I can even store it into the cache for the next 15 minutes. So any wire decorator is always appended with aura enabled cacheable equal to true. So cacheable equal to true means it means that you can say like your data will be cached into the session for the next 15 minutes. Now what happens with this? This actually improves the productivity of and performance of your lightning component. Suppose a data is not changing. Take an example. Now if I'm trying to bring in a data, okay, which is actually where you are entering a form is there where you are entering some records, you are entering out creating out an account record. Okay, now this account which you are creating or a contact which you are creating is not very regular. It happens around in a day. It is only 5 to 6 records which gets added. Okay, at that time, if you are actually going with a wire decorator, the power of our wire decorator is it will not go to the server again for a particular moment, for a particular time. So for that particular duration, it will try to store it into the cache and render the value. Now automatically, it is as simple as if you are having your data into your local server for the next 15 minutes. So automatically your rendering improves. Okay, that is how the basic so why shouldn't we do a DML into your wire method? The reason is, as I told, the DML adapter, the wire adapter or the wire has been actually introduced. Okay, so wire decorator was basically for reading out the data. As I told, it is for faster rendering of the data. Now, if you think that your data has been stored into your local server and you try to perform a DML, okay, what will happen? The DML will never be reflected back. That is the reason they recommend, and most of the documentation say that you should not be having a DML within a wire decorator, because it will always try to communicate via the server side, right? They are reducing that dependency, and that is where the wire decorator helps us. Okay, so any other questions anybody has? Ayush, I think I was able to answer my question, your question. Okay, perfect. And anybody else? Yes, Santosh, recordings will be available later. I think whenever John is able to, that will be definitely there.
I will share it in one day.
Okay, sure. Okay, so moving forward, okay, now I will talk about some of the best practices. I will start going further. Now, as we all have understood about the decorators, so don't need to actually talk about a lot here. It's all about the API track and wire. And I actually say there are certain best practices which you can follow whenever you are actually working with the API decorators. Okay. API decorators, as we told, it is a public property. Okay. So you can actually use it for any class, any field. If you want to make a field publicly available, if you want to make a class publicly available, or if you are thinking to extend your method into an LWC component, at that time also, if your API decorator helps you to pass your data after extending the component from one to another. Okay, that means that your API decorator makes the screen more public. It makes more accessible for everybody in the parent component. Okay, as a best practice, what I actually say, there can be a question. This question has been asked to me a lot of times by many people, that we should not be assigning the API property in the child component. So my question's answer to that has been that because the value, when you're actually defining a value on the child component as API, okay, so if you are actually trying to call it on the parent, since you are actually defining it on the parent and then calling it to the child, if you actually reassign that value here, okay, this will actually you can say hinder the consistency of your page, because sometimes the data might not pass in properly. Because what we do, we actually define the API property in the parent component, then we actually try to access that in the child component. Now in the child component, if I try to reassess that value, okay, I want to reassign some new value to it, since it is already passing the value from the parent, there will be a state consistency issue. Okay, the second pointer which I also talk about, that decorate the API best practices is, if any kind of component which you are trying to actually maintain, okay, you should always try to make a separate private property. I will show a sample code for that to explain you out how the sample how the private property actually gets helpful. Okay, so that I will just show you in the next slide. So if you see here, okay, this is a basic sample code which I have actually used. Okay, so if you see, there is the child component where I am just passing one message. Okay, and I am just keeping the API decorator over here, and I call it as @API message. But if you are actually, now this message needs to be always appended with a new internal variable. If you are actually using an internal message called variable, and then you use it like this dot, uh, internal message is equal to the API value which you have got plus the extended variable, what it will do is it will always keep your decorators intact, and it will always keep your API as a very useful and fast property to use. Okay, instead of using the entire directly the API decorator, it is good to use an internal variable there. Okay, I will answer to questions after these three decorators are actually discussed upon, so you can keep your questions till those three decorators. The next one is about the track. So as we told, track is actually a reactive property change. Okay, so you can actually, so I will say that whenever you are actually working with LWC, I will say some primitive fields. Okay, for example, you are using a string or you are using a boolean. Okay, so they are automatically they are already reactive, so you don't require the track in those situations already. I think if you have seen the latest releases, track is not now considered too much, so you do not need to actually declare your track variables whenever you are actually declaring a string or a boolean values. But you will always require a track. It will be good if you are actually using nested collections. For examples, if you are building out an S object, if you are building out a map, if you are actually going inside arrays, at that time what happens is mutating the properties from one section to another, okay, will be actually a bit difficult if you are not defining it into that particular field as @track. Okay, so basically @ is basically for making it reactive, so that is the reason we actually follow that. So for that, again, I have actually kept one of the basic best practices which you can think upon. I tried this out. So if you see, I have used the track decorator here. Okay, in the track decorator, what I am using is I am doing @track user, and there is an array which I am just defining, within which you can see I am declaring my name and I am declaring my age. Okay, and now I have actually kept a method called as update name, which actually is used for updating the value. So now I'm trying to update the value here. Okay, so since your track has been already updated, it is already updated with track, and there is a complex data structure for them as of now. Okay, so what will happen, automatically UI will take the new value into it and reassign it. Okay, but if I don't use track, and if I just try to do this dot user dot age equal to 25, so it will not be able to update the age, because track is not reactive at that time. Or you can say that's this variable, if I'm not defining this @track, what will happen, the value which I've passed into it, it will remain the same. So if you try to do this dot user dot age, it will not be reflecting back. So if you are using track, it will improve the performance, as well as it will also help you in mutating your values better. Coming to the third one, that is basically wire decorator. As we already know, wire is basically used for fetching the data automatically from the Salesforce server side. Okay, so some of the things like I have actually seen it personally. What we actually try to do is we try to do calls when we are actually using a ID as a parameter. Sometimes we actually pass ID as a parameter and we try to do the wire callouts. Okay, if you are having multiple parameters, okay, now what happens in that case, it will actually try to rerun the operation again and again for each and every parameter. So instead of having those multiple runs actually happening, we can just define one individual object parameter within which you can pass the values, and then you can access those values and rerun the just run the wired adapter. What will happen is it will not need to go to the server again and again, and it will automatically improve your performance. Okay, so basically that is what I have just written, that preferably you should pass a single object which minimizes the rerun and improves your performance. A basic idea, I have just given a basic. So this is what I was talking of. When you are defining @wire, the method, then you are passing ID and then type. So if you are actually passing both of them, okay, individually, it will be individual calls to the server, rerunning the wire decorator again and again. What you can do is you can actually go with wire method, where you can just pass one param object and you can keep all your values inside that param object. Now this is actually a game changer. Why? Because you will see your performance of your LWCs improving as soon as you define this object parameter within your LWC and utilizing it, because it doesn't goes to the server again to fetch the data, it is storing within itself. Okay, so I will take a pause before I actually move forward. So any questions, any doubts? I'm trying to be a little fast because of the time constraint which we have. If I'm not able to cover all the pointers, just expect there will be definitely another session to cover it up. So everybody clear with this concept of these three decorators? Anybody has any doubts? Okay, perfect. I am seeing a few no's, so I think we are good so far. Okay, yeah, Santosh. Definitely, I will try to. Let's see how much I can cover up. I will try. Okay, so yeah, so I will try to now go into the next status. So let's again go into our slides. I didn't get actually the time to actually build some sample codes on VS Code and show you the outputs because I had not prepared for it much. Okay, just yesterday I was just night I was working a little bit, so that's the reason. I'm just trying to give what experiences. We can have a working session sometime later whenever you all demand for it. Okay, you can demand it to John and we can actually have one. Okay, so going about the life cycle hooks, very interesting topic. So again, anybody who would like to tell me what are life cycle hooks? It's open platform, anybody can answer it, as I told. So please explain me what are life cycle hooks. Nobody? Valent?
Everyone is silent.
Everybody sleeping? Not sleeping, right? Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So I hope I have actually not made it a very sleepy session. I'm trying to talk as much as possible. Okay. I will try to have responses from your end as well so that I can make it more interactive. Okay. So now I will actually try to go to the pointer of life cycle hook. So basically, when I talk about life cycle hooks, life cycle hook is nothing but the entire life cycle of your LWC component. Okay. From where it starts to where it ends. Okay, this is a very crucial part of your LWC to understand. Why? Because when you are working with your lifecycle hooks and you know which particular lifecycle hook to use when, automatically you will be understanding the entire architecture of the framework here. I have some ideas for you all which you can definitely do. You can actually call your lifecycle hooks one by one into your LWC and see when which is getting generated. I have tried different scenarios and I keep it as a part of my interview questions whenever I conduct interviews. So that can be a separate topic which we can talk upon. You can reach out to me. I will give you those scenarios which I definitely go ahead with. Okay, but when I talk about lifecycle hooks, we have got 5 lifecycle hooks which are available, right? The first life cycle hook which we have is the construct. Okay, the second lifecycle hook which we have is the connected callback. The third lifecycle hook, it is like your rendered callback, and then the fourth lifecycle hook is basically like you can say it is a disconnected callback, and then you have got the error callback. So when I say these callbacks, why are these callbacks generated or why are these callbacks used? These are useful for processing your data in a particular structure. For example, constructor. Constructor is actually used whenever you are initializing your component, right? So at the time of your component load only, if you want to render some values, you can directly have your constructor loaded in the initial state, right? So similarly, you have got the second one that is called as the connected callback. So even before, so here you have to understand the concept of DOM. We have actually got that DOM, which is actually a document object model, the basic structure within which your entire LWC resides upon. Okay, so when you are doing your data communications for them, you will always have to understand whether the data has been inserted into the DOM or not. Okay, now that is what I'm going to talk over here. Okay, so when you talk about connected callback is something like you are trying to actually get the data even before inserting it into the database. Okay, even it's not into the database, my mistake, it is into the DOM. Even before the elements are inserted into the DOM, okay, connected callback comes in. Okay, that is where connected callbacks are used. Okay, now the third one is your I think it is rendered callback. So rendered callback is just the vice versa of connected callback. You can say once the elements are inserted into the DOM, then rendered callback is used. Okay. Fourth is disconnected callback. Once you have defined some events, okay, and now you want to actually remove those events from the DOM, okay, you can use the disconnected callback. Okay, and then you have got the error callback. That is basically whenever you are trying to play around with any issues. If you are actually getting a lot of errors, I have a different structure for it. I actually follow a error logging framework, but you can even use the error callback to log your errors into a custom object, and you can actually utilize that. Okay, now talking about the lifecycle hooks, we'll go with the first one. Okay, I will go with the constructor first of all. I talk about constructor, as I told, it is firing whenever the component inside is instance is created. So now let's take an example. If I am just trying to show a simple data into my from my database without performing any server call, that is not possible because you will require the wire decorators. You can use the wire here. Definitely, you can use a wire, but you will have to understand the concept of your Java. I can say how do you explain this? Sorry guys, I will take a second to just think about what I should bring in. So basically it is all about you should understand the Java properties. Okay, when you are using super classes, when you actually go for the normal instance classes, you will have to understand that. Based upon that, you will be able to take this constructor. So whenever your data is not, just before it is getting added into your DOM, whenever you want to just create your first component instance, that is like your load of the LWC component, at that time you can go with your constructor. It has got I actually call a basic strategy of having an internal state or a private variables. I actually follow the concept of private variables because it actually improves our performance. Similarly, there is a concept of super, which is I will show you. Okay, and you should always avoid using any of the API properties which have not been finalized or initialized, because API decorator is actually, once the data is into the DOM, you will be making it publicly available, right? So don't try to actually use API properties at that time. And if you are actually trying to render some of the DOM properties, that is also not suggested because it is not yet onto the DOM. It has not yet been actually rendered only. Okay. I will see if I can actually show some call your examples if in the end if it is possible. And then I am open to questions once I actually complete out the lifecycle hooks again. So let me complete that first. The next one is connected callback. As I told, connected callback is getting called when the component is first time inserted into the DOM, but it has not yet rendered. It has not yet been rendered, but it has just been inserted into the DOM. At that time, I have some basic best practices to follow. You always try to fetch the data, you add your event listeners wherever there is a chance of connection status to be checked. Okay. For example, how will you know that in your connected callback that your connection has actually completed, or your connection has actually been made? Okay. At that time, you can use this dot is connected to check your connected status. Okay. And you can actually avoid few things like mutating your API properties. As I told, API is something like once your data has been into your DOM, then only you render it. So I actually don't prefer using it as a part of connected callback. I actually don't I try to avoid it wherever possible. Okay. And if there is any kind of complex initializations based on your APIs, you, instead of using the API values, instead of using the API decorator, you can go with the getter setter methods. Okay, the getter setter methods are a better way to actually communicate it when you are actually working with your connected callback. Coming over to rendered callback. Rendered callback is something like whenever your data model or your DOM value changes, your DOM elements changes, each and every time it will start rendering. Okay, it is very useful when you are using third-party libraries. Okay, for example, I am trying to do a data communication where I am trying to render say data from a chart. I want to render my data in the form of a chart. So there is a third-party library which is called as icharts.js that you can use. Okay, if you're using that, okay, you will see that for each and every time your data changes, the rendered callback will be initialized again and again, because each and every time your data changes, the DOM elements also change. So as soon as the DOM elements change, the rendered callback gets called. Okay, your rendered callback can be called multiple times, but that can also impact your performance. For example, if I am using multiple places where I am doing rendered callback for rendering the data, and if I actually don't stop it, it will actually go into a concept of recursion. Okay, what is recursion? We all know as a part of the triggers. We have seen it many times. Similar to that, here also we can just maintain one particular Boolean flag. With that Boolean flag, you can definitely control your rendered callback. So that is very important when you are actually writing down a large chain of your Lightning component. For example, say you are building up a live project. Okay, and there is, I will take one example which I have been working on recently, where we are actually working with Lightning components, and this is more about a very complex architecture where we are having 7 to 8 different objects being involved upon. Okay, the first is basically I can say the first one is work order. Related to that, I have also got invoices, I have got work order line items, I have got several other objects, and there are several calculations which are happening as a part of this life cycle which I am performing in my LWC. There I was seeing some performance issues. Okay, so we were actually using a third party library for rendering out a particular set of data in the form of PDF. Okay, so now that is basically for your invoice generation. We were trying to generate a PDF which can be utilized. So we use the third party library that is called as JS which is directly available. So we use that, but the performance was very slow. So I found out when I was applying my console logs. Okay, so I found out that the rendered callback is getting called for each and every time my DOM values are being getting called for multiple calculations. So what I did, I declared a basic Boolean variable, and wherever I wanted to stop it, I just actually just made it to false. Automatically, it actually helps me improving my performance. Similarly, I have also got some pointers like you don't update your wire adapters config object any of the time, or you don't actually go for too many times for API or reactive track fields during the rendered callback. During the rendered callback, the data has been already inserted, so you don't try to update it multiple times. That will actually impact your performance a lot. Talking about the fourth one, that is actually called as disconnected. So disconnected callback is very, very important. Okay, we actually try to actually I say avoid it many a times. We say that why is it needed also, but disconnected callback is very helpful for means improving the performance. Why? Because suppose a data is still into the DOM and it is still rendering its events. Okay, so the events are running in the back end, which will automatically do some memory leakages for us. Okay, so instead of going with that kind of a mechanism, we should use the disconnected callback, so that they are automatically clean out your event listeners, they clear out your timers, any intervals which were actually used in your basic code. Okay, we have got the promises, right? So we use promises, we use async await. So those kind of any kind of calls which we are using in your LWC, at that time you should actually use the concept of one of the methods I have just shown is clear interval. If you actually use clear interval, it will automatically clear out your timer and automatically your performance increases. Okay, I think before I move, I will actually open the platform for some questions. See, when wire called is the in this exact cycle. Wire, you can say wire is again a separate part of this life cycle. You can actually call it as a part of your constructor as well. You can even call it as a part of your normal cycle when rendering your data. Okay, the data load is a separate perspective. I am talking about when you are actually calling about the rest of the things. Any other questions?
No, Nikhil, you can continue. Thank you.
Okay, so everybody very clear with the concepts? Okay, but wire cannot be called inside any callback methods. Yes, wire cannot be called inside any of the callback methods, because wire is more like, as I told, wire property is more like a kind of a cacheable property. So you should actually use it only when you are reading your data, not to try inside any callback methods. It is not preferred. Okay, clear so far? So far, so good. Any other questions? I hope, Santosh, you were able to get your answer. Okay, perfect. Anybody else has any questions? I will take a pause for 10 seconds and then I will start. No questions? Okay. Expecting either you all are experts or either I am not explaining things properly. Might be that can be the only cases. Okay, so just try to be as I will say, whenever you have questions. Yes, I told about 5 lifecycle hooks. I have not talked about the error callback. As I told, for the error callback, you can actually build out your own error logging framework. Okay. So basically, for example, if you are actually trying to go with error callback, it will be helping you out to track your errors. Then what you can do is you can prepare a custom object on which you can track your errors. This actually helps you in better rendering of your Lightning components. That is a separate topic altogether. That's the reason I have not kept it here, because error logging and its framework is completely different when you are working on. But error callback doesn't have too many best practices. When you call the error callback, it has got only 2 to 3 properties into it. That is more than sufficient to use. Okay. And to answer your question, Sunil or Venkata, so connected callback, we can use wire, but it is not preferred. As I told, it is not actually a part of the callback. Okay, we should not be going for that, because these are two different rendering cycles. Connected callbacks. Okay, so connected callback is more like, you can say, it is being used when you are trying to get the data. Okay, one time you want to perform some DMLs, and then wire comes in. Wire doesn't support that. Clear? So you cannot use wire inside your connected callbacks. Okay. Clear? Any other questions? You can call your wire methods twice. That is possible. There is a sample code for it. You can reach out to me, Divya. There is actually a sample code for it. You can execute your wire methods twice as well. Okay. Which gets called first, wire or connected callback? I will prefer you should go with wire, because wire will actually rendering life cycle in comparison to your connected callback. Okay. So yeah, Divya, you can reach out to me. I will definitely give you that particular sample code. You can actually see how your wire method can be called twice as well. I can actually call wire methods multiple times in my execution. Okay. Any other questions? If the session gets extended by a few minutes, I hope everybody is fine with that. If anybody has, kindly let me know. Okay, fine. So I will go back to my section again, talking about LWC events. Okay, so why are events needed? We all know events are actually useful for doing data communications. Okay, so basically, if you are actually doing a child to parent communication, and if you are trying to actually send your data from the child component to the parent component, at that time you define your events. There are event propagations, event bubbling, all those concepts comes into part of your LWC events. Okay, so when I talk about that, there are some of the things which you can always do. Okay, for example, when I was saying about the custom event, so when you're defining a custom event, when you're doing your communication from the child component to the parent component, okay, you can actually use some primitive values, or you can even use shallow copies of your object. Okay, you can create a shallow copy of your object and you can utilize that value multiple times. Okay, so what we do basically when we try to communicate, we define out a custom event in the child component, then we do this dot dispatch event, and then within that you define your custom event and you pass the detail. Okay, so you can pass details like contact selected. Okay, this can be a basically a kind of, you can say, a basic shallow copy of your object or a basic primitive value which you can pass into your payload of the custom event. That will automatically help you improving your performance. Don't try to pass entire data. Sometimes what we try to do is we try to pass the entire object, which is really not needed as well. Many of the your senior tech leads will be also okay with that, to say that please pass the entire object value directly. Okay, and then access whatever values you want for the future considerations. But I will say, until and unless you are not actually rendering large set of values, don't try to actually pass. Only pass the set primitive values which you really need, or you create out a shallow copy of your object and then pass it. Okay, uh, similarly, wherever possible, use constants. Okay, so constant is preferable over variables. Okay, instead of using var, you can use constant. Constant actually, first of all, it actually maintains your typos. The second thing is it maintains your code, as well as the third thing is it is in lightweight in comparison to the other variable. If you're using var, or if you're using with any other properties, those are actually having a little bit higher weight in comparison to constant. So if you are using constant, it is always good to use, because it will always events performance. Then talking about the lightning mesh services. So as I told about the two types of events, we talked about the parent to child, we talked where we were using the API, we talked about the child to parent. At that time we were talking about the last one where we were talking about custom events. And then we have got the third one, when your components are isolated from each other, right? At that time you can go for two kinds of communications. Okay, one is pub sub, that was introduced earlier, and now we have got the lightning mesh services, right? So basically PubSub is actually, if you ask me, PubSub is actually used when you are actually cross communicating. If you are doing cross communications, like you are actually communicating from your LWC to a VF page, if you are communicating from your LWC to an Aura component, at those type of scenarios, I will say you can go with the PubSub model. But if you are actually communicating within your LWC components, okay, or cross tab communications, at that time lightning mesh services is a game changer for you. Okay, so any kind of app wide notifications you want to do, any kind of cross communications you want to do, even if you have used omniscripts, I don't know if you have actually explored that section, you can even use lightning mesh services to communicate from your omniscripts, because your omniscripts basically get compiled into the form of an LWC component itself. Okay, and then in your flows also you can use LMS. That is also means when you are actually defining your screen flows, and if you are trying to call an LWC, that is also one of the sections which you can definitely do. Okay, so these are some of the best practices which you actually follow for your events. One of them is also for your disconnected callback. So as I was saying about, I have taken a sample code over here. Okay, if you see, I am adding a event listener here for handling particular method, a handle reside method. Okay, so now since I added this method, if I don't remove it from the DOM, what is going to happen at a certain period of time? Okay, when you are actually doing a lot of calculations, you will be seeing issues that that your this method is getting called, or this variable is still actually a part of your memory. Okay, that actually automatically piles up into your memory when you are doing a lot of connected callbacks and complex architectures. Okay, so you should avoid that. So what you can do, you can actually call a disconnected callback and do window dot remove event listener to call this method. So what it will do is, it will automatically, whatever the window events you called in your connected callback will be removed from your memory, and this will actually improve the performance of your LWC component. Okay, and then some of them, so you might be knowing the concept of event bubbling, right? So what is event bubbling? Anybody who wants to explain me? Let's see. Anybody who wants to tell me what is event bubbling? No one? Okay, I will try to explain a bit about it. So basically, when you are actually working with any kind of shadow DOM trees, or you are working with your DOM, okay, and you are trying to actually call a particular method. For example, you are actually defining a modal. Okay, the modal gets called for a particular action. Okay, if you will see multiple times, if your modal is being called at multiple section, you will have to either use bubbles, means you have to actually see the event bubbling happening, and at that time you actually use event dot stop propagation to actually stop that propagation method. Okay, because that model is rendering in the DOM again and again. Okay, so actually you should actually understand when to use bubbles true and when to use composed true. These are two different attributes of event bubbling. Okay, so when you are actually using bubbles true, that means that the event will bubble up through your shadow DOM tree. That means it will automatically be piled up in your shadow DOM. Similarly, if you are actually going with composed equal to true, okay, so composed true, what it actually does is, for example, you are having cross components, so your shadow DOM of the bound of the components can be automatically crossed. Okay, there will be a chance where you can actually the data can get inserted from one section to another. That is the reason we actually say that avoid using any kind of use of bubbles true and compose true when you are actually working with any kind of lightning web components. Okay, use them, but use them very wisely. Okay, for example, see, whenever you actually need an explicit parent child listener. Okay, for example, you want your parent events from any deep nested children. For example, you have got a grandparent, you have got a child has got a grandchild, and the grandchild has got another grandchild. Okay, so grand to grandchild communication to the parent one. At that time, you can actually, what you can do is, you can use the bubbles true. Okay, that will actually help you to get your communication easy. Okay, it is very good method, or you can say a good process to keep your events intact. I have taken one example. Okay, this is the basic example which I always try to do. Any custom event, give its details. I keep bubbles false and composed false in my basic codings scenarios. Okay, so if you are actually keeping them as false, so by the default behavior only, you are sufficient enough to do all your communications. But if you are actually requiring it for doing some deep nested collections and all, at that time use your bubbles true or composed true. I think before I move, any questions still here before I move to lightning services? So refers to the process where an event triggered a child component automatically propagates to its parent component. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Events are like that only. Anybody has any questions, concern? Thanks, Heath, for bringing that up. No questions? Everybody clear? Or everybody sleeping? Everybody clear or everybody sleeping? Clear. Okay. Perfect. So good that I'm hearing clear. So what I will actually ask is when you understand this session, if you are actually really understanding this session well, when you are doing a post on LinkedIn, okay, whoever is doing the post, if you are interested to, I will ask that you can actually explain one of the concepts which you really understood well during this entire presentation, and you can actually talk about it, okay, in the post itself. That actually gives me more visibility, and that will actually also help me to understand how good my session went, okay, and that will help me to actually keep things better. I know I have actually not kept a live project scenario here, but I will definitely try to bring it up in one other session. We will actually require one more session for this kind of best practices implementation. I can show you the difference, how your components really load in. Okay, that will be really great for you all.
Sure, Nikhil, we will do more sessions if you have
Yes.
availability.
Sure. Okay. Now going over to the next one, talking about Lightning Data Services, LDS. Why LDS is needed? Anybody who would like to talk? Why LDS is needed? Anybody? Why do we need LDS? Or if somebody can just tell me what is LDS all about? Very nice. So Tejasvi said Lightning Data Services. I understood that. But what is the purpose of it? Puneet, you can go ahead.
Firstly, this is Lightning Data Service, and another point here is it's out of the box given by the LWC, where we can create a form, edit form, view form, all different types of forms we can do. Third part here is without writing any code to save data, system will allow to save data or get data from your object by giving the fields we are looking for. So these
Okay.
are, and the fourth point here is normally if we write the custom code or custom LWC completely, we have to do refresh the page, right? Like manually, or you can say like we have to write the code to refresh it. Since we are using UI record, automatically it will refresh the page. Those are points.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough explanation. I will just try to add one more pointer to it. Okay, so Lightning Data Services. Okay, so I will ask one question before I actually proceed here. It removes the need of calling Apex for DML every time, but it helps in doing so only through JS, my understanding. Yes, up to a certain point, correct. So I have a question for you all. Okay, let's see how much you all tried to understand about LWC so far. So who all have worked with VF pages here? Anyone who has tried working with VF pages? No. Okay. Okay. Little bit. Okay. So you say it's a little bit. Okay. So now think from this perspective. In VF page, we already had one kind of a concept. Okay. What is that?
Lightning do something.
No, not Lightning. Within your VF page, you also have got a concept similar to Lightning Data Services. What is that? So Heath has worked, Ayush has worked, standard controller. Absolutely correct. Yes. So when you use the standard controller, it also gives you some basic functionalities, right? Some basic inbound functionalities. However, it is more elaborative. Okay, whereas our data services is not. LDS is also a similar kind of process which allows you to go to the server, get the data without needing an apex call. Okay, now without needing an apex call, that means there are a lot of benefits. We will talk about them, like you don't require test class for it, you don't require too much of complex operations on it, you don't need to think about DML operations. All things will be handled within your lightning data service itself. But but there is a constraint. The constraint is your lightning data service is for one record at a time. It is not good for multiple records. You cannot, right? So but in your standard controller of your VF page, you can do that. Okay, in your standard controller you have the ability to save even multiple records together, whereas here you will not be able to do that, because for that you will actually have to go for a controller class, which will be again extending your LWC. Okay, now when you are using LDS is more about, you can say, a process which improves the entire version controlling of your LWC component. It is a game changer for us, for especially wherever you don't require too much of data operations. For example, let me take an example. Okay, let me think of one. I have a company, okay, and my company is across different states of India. I want to make promotions. Okay, I want to give promotions, but promotions will be varying from state to state, right? I cannot actually give that promotion, the same promotion that say I am saying selling vehicles. Okay, now selling a vehicle with 20% discount in Mumbai versus selling a vehicle and 20% discount in Kerala will be different. Why? Because there will be different revenue, expenses, location cost, everything involved in it, right? So I actually decided to use an object called as promotions, and I wanted to make sure that the user who is logging in from the particular region or state, we get data rendered from that particular state only. Okay, for that particular state, whatever the promotions are. So what I did, now as soon as I talk about this kind of a process, I will definitely need a junction object. I introduce a junction object which I call it as user promotions. Okay, which will keep the track of my currently logged in user ID as well as the promotions which I am giving, right? And now I try rendering this. So I can actually render this one promotion at a time. Anybody can order products from my system, only one product at a time. When you are doing this announcements and promotions, okay, I just need to create promotions only one record. I don't require too many records to be created at once. I can use LDS. Why? Because I am only inserting one record at a time. Why do I, and I don't have any complex situations here. I have just got the objects available. I will just call them in my LDS JS, and automatically it will perform my CRUD operations. So I don't need to actually think a lot about it. And it has got its different standard methods to actually pull in data and show together. You have got the lightning record edit form, lightning record forms. We have got so many tags already available from them. So that is one of the use cases which I actually always think about. Okay, so for lightning data services, but the constraint is one record at a time. You cannot handle multiple records there, so we have to always understand that one constraint. Now going back to some of the best practices when I actually talk about, so about LDS. Okay, so when you are working with individual records, when you want to auto handle your CRUD and your field level securities, and you want to have your automatic UI refresh, as Puneet was mentioning, at that time you should use your Lightning data services. Okay, because you have to understand that Lightning data services always optimize your server calls via their own bulkification and deduplication method. Okay, they have got some methods, like for example, if you see get record, create defaults. These are different wire adapters given from the LDS, which you can directly utilize. Okay, and then you can always specify your fields explicitly instead of calling for the layouts. I actually don't prefer going too much for layouts. I actually try to keep the sample simple. Call out all the fields which you are really needing as a part of your page. Okay, I definitely understand that will actually be a rework whenever there is a new field being introduced if you are not calling the layout. But if you are calling the entire layout, you will be seeing there are some performance rendering issues which I actually saw long back, and based on that I'm just sharing my experience. Okay, and what you can actually do is you can use the UI record API. Okay, so anybody who can tell me what is the purpose of UI record API? Talking a lot. Yeah, Puneet, go ahead.
Basically, it is for out of the box. We can use a get record or create record or delete record with this UI record API, right? And with this UI record API, if you want to read some field value, right? Suppose in your data you're getting the multiple fields, and I want to read some specific field through this, we can get it.
Awesome. Yes. Perfect. So UI record API is useful in this kind of a scenario. Definitely, yes. And so you can actually go for UI record APIs. I have actually shared some of the methods. If you see here, at the rate wire, the get record method, within which I am passing the record ID as a parameter and whatever the fields I want to call. It can be a name field, it can be an email field, and then I call it. Okay, automatically what happens is whatever the fields I want to explicitly call, I am going to call it here in my field section. Automatically what it does is it helps me to render only those fields and improves my performance as well. Another pointer is use your LDS wire adapters and functions whenever you want to actually go for single transactions. As I have already told, it cannot handle multi-record transaction updates, and you have got different LDS methods already available. For example, you have got create record, update record, and delete record directly available. You can directly use it. And there is for example, if you want to notify your user, okay, the cache can automatically help you to even notify your data changes as well. Okay, you can use this get record notify change. That will also help you to actually get your data and give you notifications. That is definitely possible as a part of your lightning data services. Many times for doing a custom notification, we think of toast messages, we think of doing a server call, that we will have to extend our component and we will just call a custom notification from there and then display it out. You don't need to do all of this here. You already have got the get record notify change, which helps you doing it. Similarly, when you're working with, when you need to go for Apex, now the question is, I use LDS, I am already doing my things, but there will be certain scenarios where I will say LDS is not preferred. I have talked about them. For example, if you are performing complex queries, joins, aggregations, and if you are trying to perform any multi-record updates, if you want any kind of custom filtering, any kind of pagination, sorting, retrieving the records based on a certain criteria, I would actually say that please go with Apex classes rather than going with LDS, because LDS will not be a good fit for these use cases. Talking about some of the other design considerations. Okay, so I will try to speed up a bit for the next few minutes, and then I will again come back for your questions. So these are some of the UI level considerations which I always prefer. Okay, I will just try to talk a little about it. As I told, I was talking about in the previous slide, the Lightning data services. Wherever possible, go for it because it actually improves your Apex calls. Okay. Similarly, use Aura enabled cacheable true to read the data and cache your records wherever needed. Okay, these are simple ones, but the third one is a very important one. For example, if you are trying to do pagination on your page, okay, and you are trying to load thousands of records, okay, I will say please go with array slice methods. Okay, array slice methods always improves the JavaScript pagination performance. Okay, we all know that JavaScript cannot handle large set of data. It can be good for small set of data, but even if you are having large set of data, if you are actually knowing the concept of array dot slice, you will be able to slice your data up to a certain chunk and then display it out. Similarly, if you are doing the conditional rendering, for example, you have built 3-4 components and you want to render each component based on a particular condition, I will actually say to use the if true and if false directives. Okay, that is like template if true, template if false is basically a better directive to use for your any kind of DOM load. Okay, Similarly, if you are actually trying to import some objects and field references during the compile time, for example, you are trying to compile your data and you want to check your performance, you can use @salesforce slash schema. This is actually a static import method which is available, which helps you to check your performance well. Similarly, any kind of DOM manipulations, complex ones, which are actually inside rendered callbacks, shouldn't be there. Okay, you shouldn't be doing those. I actually prefer avoiding that. And you have the concept of lazy loading and infinite scroll. You can actually go with them. I will prefer going with lazy loading. Even infinite scroll has got its own limitations. So I will say lazy loading is always a very good option to go for. Talking about the second one, that is actually the data retrieval consideration. This is some basic Apex practices. Along with that, I will tell about some LWCs. So basically, you try to use the SQL field selections, only specify the specific fields which you need. Definitely try to apply limits, because limits will always reduce the payload size. Okay. And if you are actually trying to go for page retrievals, you have only around 2000 records to render upon. I will actually prefer going with offsets. Okay, that actually helps you to improve your performance. Similarly, any kind of nested loops, as you know, in your Apex, we should not be keeping it. And similarly, for UI API methods, okay, for example, you are trying to do a drop down, you are trying to bring in a value from the drop down. What we basically try to do is we try to do schema.picklist entry class in the Apex class, try to get the values and utilize it. Instead of that, you can use the UI API methods which are standard available, which helps you to get the objects info. It also gives you the picklist values directly from the metadata. So that will actually prevent one extra call to the server. So I am actually talking about just how to prevent your server calls, how to improve the performance here. Because when you are writing LWCs, right now you might be doing some basic works, you are learning for yourself, and you might be having small works. But in any complex project, you will definitely need performance considerations to be taken care of. Okay. Talking about the rendering and DOM optimization, I would say whenever you are actually using large arrays, you should not use template for each. Okay. Instead of that, you can actually store it into a particular list and then use li objects to actually update the values. Okay. Similarly, avoid any kind of frequent DOM updates or conditional rendering. Okay. Basically, if that is a reactive field, for example, I have marked a field as track, okay, a particular decorator, and then I am trying to do DOM updates over them, or I am trying to do any conditional rendering, that will automatically reduce our performance. Okay, so instead of that, you use those variables which are not marked as track, okay, just to not make them reactive, and then use them as a part of your DOM updates and conditional rendering. Any kind of nesting within many lightning components will always be a loophole. Okay. Because until and unless your LWCs are really means doing very proper communication and they are well optimized, automatically your nesting and data communications becomes very hard to control. Talking about some server call recommendations, as I had already told you. Okay, so if you are performing server calls for your LWCs, okay, avoid any kind of unnecessary server calls. For example, I was talking about the record UI API, right? So record UI API helps you to pull in picklist values. It allows you to basically get the records metadata without doing a server call. So good to use. Okay, similarly, you can use your components via shared JS modules. So this is one thing which I think you all might not have explored, or you might have been exploring. I'm not sure about it. But when you are actually having multiple components, you can actually define out your own JavaScript utility class as well, similar to what you do in your Angular and React JS. And then you can just extend that JS utility class and you can call your methods and reuse them again and again. Okay, this is actually another game changer which actually helps you to improve your server calls. Along with that, whenever you are having some client side filtering on your LWC, okay, or you are trying to perform sorting, I will say you should use array.filter or array.sort to sort the data, or use more use of JavaScript methods there. Okay, And whenever you are doing asynchronous callouts, like you are doing a call out to an external system, during that time you should make use of continuation apex. So continuation apex basically you perform the call again and again. That is how your external callouts work in. Similarly, I had told you about wire, and then we had talked about connected callback. Connected callback is basically like an imperative call out. So I would actually say whenever you are actually performing any updates on your records, okay, you can use the UI record API as well. UI record API has got its methods, as I was telling earlier, like update record, create record, and then in your imperative apex, you can even perform your DMLs. And any kind of server calls, I will not ever tell you to put it. Many times people say that you can do it because you are getting the data in your rendered callback. Why not to make a server call from there? But I will actually say avoid doing that. Instead, once you have done with your rendered callback, try to actually pass it into a variable, define a separate function, call that function values separately. And wherever you are trying to handle errors, please try to use try catch and user friendly messages. Some of the components design best practice are actually like I am talking about sorry. Yeah, so when you are actually trying to define components, I will always say you that you please go with reusable components concepts. Okay, basically reusable components are very good for your lightning web components. They make it lightweight. Okay, they actually improve the performance, as well as they also help you prevent some memory leakages. Okay, and also if you already know about lightning, lightning has the concept of reusability itself. So that is where we should actually try following that concept. Similarly, keeping your components modular, focused. Okay, use actually track very wisely, as I was telling about the track parameters. Okay, and similarly, as I was already telling you about object parameters, instead of having individual parameters, because that will actually prevent your rewiring to happen. Similarly, when you are trying to actually go for search filter methods, at that time debouncing is a very good concept. I will talk about this debouncing in a few minutes. Okay, and then you have got the getter methods, which are actually not very heavy operations. Okay, so they are actually good for any kind of fields which you are trying to render upon. And any kind of console logs. Now this is actually something which we should always avoid. Okay, when you are going for any production deployment, it is said that don't keep any console logs. There are two reasons behind it. The first is console logs actually gives the freedom for the user to check the logs, how things are, and it actually helps people to even get into your DOM via the console section. That is one point of it. But console logs are heavy as well as a part of your memory and performance. So if you are having too many console logs being called into your LWC, that will actually just hinder down your performance of the LWC components. Now, for your security and governance considerations, I will say you can actually always go for FLS wherever needed. Okay, I actually prefer the concept of sharing as well as the describe field results. So schema.get describe, schema.describe field result. These are two different things. Schema.get global describe is a very heavy call. I don't prefer going for it a lot of times. But basically, if you are actually working with the normal data sets, you can definitely go with schema.describe field result. That helps you getting the data. And the other two are very simple, like you should not be going for without sharing, and don't expose any sensitive data to it. Talking about some anti-patterns, because before I move to anti-patterns, any which you all have. I have tried to be a bit fast here, else it would have taken a lot of time. Anybody?
No, Nikhil, there is no questions. You can continue.
Okay, perfect. I will go ahead and continue. I will talk about the anti-patterns. For example, I was already saying only fetch the necessary fields. Don't retrieve thousands of records. Instead of that, you can actually slice and use them. Don't trigger any server calls in the rendered callback. Don't pass any entire S object via API. Because in your API, what happens is it is actually having only primitive data or any shallow structures. So if you are actually passing large objects, that will actually increase the memory uses and coupling. Okay. And similarly, if you are going with rendered callback, the server calls will basically cause infinite loops and degrade the performance of your LWC. You should try avoiding unbounded DOM rendering. For example, as I was telling, if you are trying to work on hundreds of sets, okay, instead of using for each loops, you can actually use pagination. Okay, pagination is a very good concept which can actually slice your data and only render the data which is needed instead of loading the entire data into your for each. Okay, so now don't use too many track decorators, because track decorators are basically for re-rendering the property changes. It is more about a reactive property change. And don't chain your reactive properties too much times. Okay, because if you are doing with a lot of reactive property changes, complex dependencies, at that time what will happen is it will automatically degrade your performance. Now, some of the basic things which you can even do, these are actually some bonus pointers from my end. Okay, instead of doing this dot template dot query selector, very many times we actually try to call DOM queries like this. Okay, instead of using this dot template dot query selector, what you can do is you can use LWC ref. Okay, LWC ref has been introduced. Okay, you can directly pass it in your declarative and optimized access. If you see, I have already given a sample code for it. Okay, if you are exporting your lightning component, writing a handle click method where I have done this dot refs, and I have got a refs method where I am returning the template refs. So what it does is, instead of doing the template dot query selector, I am able to get the values directly using LWC ref. It is a very good process. You can definitely go with that. It is actually very good for any kind of performance issues when you are facing in your LWC components. Now, I was talking about debouncing. So as I told, I will be talking about it. So debouncing is basically like whenever your input fields are being actually used on frequent keystrokes. For example, if somebody says that I want to do a keyword based search, okay, and for each and every keystroke, I want to actually get the server calls data, the server's data. Okay, I would say there should be some bouncing strategies like set timeouts and all. Okay, you can actually keep a clear timeout method, and then in your timeout you can do a set timeout for 3 seconds. That will actually have a delay to your server call. Okay, that expensive server calls will be prevented, and automatically you will be able to improve your performance. The next one, basically, I am just going to talk about one extra thing here, that is tools. I actually, now Lightning has actually given you the feature of the local development server. We have got introduced to the local development server. Why? Because, for example, many times when you are doing your mobile based rendering, your UI rendering, you want to see how your component is working well or not, even before loading the static resource, or even before updating the values. So what will you do as of now? As of now, if there is a change in your static resource which you need to make, and then you want to check the values, you will have to download the static resource, make the change to the file, upload it back, and then call the LWC to see the performance. Now you don't require that anymore. Earlier we used to have a server called as Proxily, which used to do the same. It actually helps you to prevent your server calls, and you can actually see your updates live. Similar to that, Lightning has in the concept of local development server. Okay, so you can actually do very rapid prototyping, any kind of component testing, and you can do any kind of testing over your local development server itself before deploying it to the environment. That actually improves the performance of your Lightning components rendering as well. How? Because you will not have to go to the server again and again to check everything out. Your own development will also get faster because you will be able to check it offline itself. For that, you will require an SFDX plugin, and then you will have to this plugin has to be installed, and then you will actually require an emulator where you can actually check for your media queries if you are actually rendering your mobile devices. And then there are some mobile apps available via which you can do it. I will actually, if anybody is interested about this, how to use the local development server, I will actually give you some sample code for it if you can reach out to me. And this is just a sample experience how you actually enable it. You will be seeing here, I have actually just taken a sample from your Kapil Batra's org when he was actually taking it. I have used it in my org. So if you see enable lightning preview pref is equal to true, when you do this, automatically it actually makes it available for lightning previews, and you will be able to see it in your local development server. So these are some of the considerations which I actually wanted to make before actually I talk about the performance improvements. So with this, I am opening the floor for any kind of questions. If you have, please go ahead, and if everything has gone well, did you like? No answers, no questions.